This week, we have George Swain, who lives in the Hudson Valley in New York State. He started randonneuring in 2007 and completed London Edinburgh London in 2009. Unfortunately, while training for PBP 2011, he was involved in a very serious biking accident. He recovered to complete his first PBP in 2015, and he returned again in 2019, but this time DNF'd PBP. George, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to meet you, Peter.
Yes. Weirdly, George, I think I've followed you on Instagram. I didn't mention this before, but I think I've followed you for quite a while. So now to actually meet you in person.
Well, I feel the same way. It's great.
Yes. So I was just admiring, as I was saying, your beautiful photographs of Scotland.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, your recent trip.
My wife and I took a wonderful trip to Scotland, and we walked the West Highland Way, which was for us, it was an 8-day linear path through the wilds of the Scottish Highlands. And it was a bit like a brevet with no bikes and a lot more sleep.
Yeah, I like it. A lot safer as well.
That's right.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, let's start with my usual first question, George. What does PBP mean to you?
Oh, PBP is the brass ring for randonneuring, I think. It really, there is nothing like it. I have not ridden all of the international brevets of a similar distance, so I can't, through experience, compare it to every other opportunity, but there's something absolutely special and unique connected to the history of PBP and, the history of cycling.
What was that finish line? What did that feel like, your first PBP in 2015?
I remember cresting a hill as I was coming into the finish, and just weeping. It was such a journey for me personally to have made it back to the kind of shape I could be in to finish that, and then to actually finish that event. It was really very emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you expect that it would be emotional? Are you normally emotional?
I am. Well, if you ask my kids what it's like to watch a movie with me, they would say I'm highly emotional and prone to crying. But so there is a temperamental side of me. So I was not shocked by that, but it was so authentic, and it came from within. It was not, it was not something I thought, oh, now I should cry. It was just like, whoa, I was just overcome with emotions. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, just looking at your excellent ride report, you've got multiple of them, by the way. They're really well written.
Thank you.
I think for you, and I'm just guessing here, you did London, Edinburgh, London in 2009.
Yeah.
Then you were going to do the brass ring, as you describe it, but you were involved in that terrible accident. So it must have felt like an incredible completion, I suppose, the end of that journey, maybe.
It sure did.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's crazy. Cool. All right, let's go back to the start. Tell me about your background in cycling, why you like to ride, first memory, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a suburban region of New Jersey, and there was no public transportation. And so as a kid, the only way you got around, locally was on a little bicycle where you walked, where you asked your parents to drive you someplace. And then as I got older and my friends were further afield and I wanted greater independence, I got my first 10 speed. And that bike was absolutely liberating for me, and so I was able to be so independent and free and able to, just design my own schedule and meet up with people. So it's always, I think cycling has been an athletic pursuit for me, and there's a quality of it that involves, the physical, challenge. But from a very early time, I think it had to do with freedom and independence.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, particularly when overseas people, think New Jersey, they think the Bada Bing. Basically. That's right? Okay.
Right, yeah.
And it's not like that at all. It's a very rural place.
It is a rural place.
Right?
That's right.
It's very green.
Yeah.
Where exactly did you grow up?
I grew up in central New Jersey, so it's actually a place I ride quite a bit. The New Jersey Randonneurs have some wonderful rides out into the western part of the state that are very rural and hilly, and it brings me back into places I used to ride when I was a kid, which is really wonderful. So, yes.
It's funny when you said you got your first 10 speed. Like I remember having a single speed and just being fascinated by bikes with gears.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the first one I got with gears. It just felt like a I know, some kind of a rocket thrust. You'd pull that lever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Magical.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Tell me about PBP. How did you originally hear about PBP?
So I found randonneuring in 2007 on kind of a lark. I'd reached this plateau. I felt like I'd reached a plateau. I was sort of doing, about 3 or 4 century rides a year. And I would do these sort of big charity rides. And the sort of that was what I had sort of come to find as a way to sort of build a season around these sort of mass starred large group events. And I was sort of feeling a little tapped out, like that was kind of boring. And so I was just poking around on the internet, and found some breadcrumbs to these people that were doing these extraordinary distances. And I thought it just had to be like typos, and like, there's no way that people can ride their bike for this many miles. It's humanly impossible. So I got really curious and engaged in that. And so I began in 2007, connected with a local, New Jersey group, and did my first 200K, and that I was hooked, and built a season. That season around I got my first SR that year. I thought, well, I could do a 300 if I could do a 200. Let me try, and so I built my way through a season. That was also 2007, which was a PBP year. So people were talking a lot about training for PBP, and what is this PBP you keep talking about? And there were some people who had done it before, and they would tell these stories. And I thought, oh my God, that is something I've got to do at some point in my life. But I knew that I could not do it that first year and remain married.
Yeah.
So I had to,
Yes.
I had to
Yes.
default to put punt to the
It
next
sounds
time.
Yeah, it sounds like you had thought about it though.
I definitely,
Should I remain married or not?
it definitely it crossed my mind, and I thank God I made the right choice.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So then when did you do you remember when you decided to attempt it? So you missed 2007. So then obviously then LEL was 2010, was
It
that
was
right?
2009. So I
Oh,
knew
sorry,
that I wanted
2009.
to
Yeah.
do an event of this distance, and LEL was coming up, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So let me give that a shot. I love traveling.
Yes.
I love.
The marriage was on a better footing at
It
this
was
stage,
it was
or
better. I had
you,
so,
you were feeling more
I had some time to lead up to that. I had so
okay,
I
all right.
could break it to her slowly, and yeah. So I just jumped in. LEL was the longest event I'd ever done. I'd never done anything longer than a 600. So I just said, well, how hard could it be? Let me just go figure it out, and
Yeah,
it was unbelievable. It was just such an amazing experience.
yeah,
So I just loved it, and at that point I knew I had to do PPP, which was
yeah.
coming up 2 years later.
Did you have any thoughts about doing LEL before PBP, or it just the timing worked out that way?
Yeah, the timing worked out that way. It wasn't that one was more important than the other or less
Yeah,
important than the other. It was just, wow, here's an opportunity. It's funny, to
yeah,
date, I have never ridden a domestic 1200K.
yeah.
I've ridden
That's amazing.
PBP twice, I've ridden LEL twice, and I've never done a local 1200K. I've done 1000Ks. I've done,
Yeah.
but
It's,
it's funny how
it
this,
sounds anti-American,
I
Joe,
know,
but
right?
that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Um, so then you're training, you have an amazing experience at LEL,
Yeah.
which in many ways I understand is probably even harder than
In
PBP.
some
Is that
respects,
right?
yeah. I mean, the pressures,
Yeah,
the time pressures, the pressures around,
yeah,
the volume of people in controls is a different scale. So I think that's more
yeah,
challenging in some ways on PBP. But the physical terrain is definitely more challenging in LEL than on PBP.
okay. And I think I remember somewhere that you had in the back of your mind a Charlie Miller attempt for
Yeah,
2009. Is that correct?
I did at
Okay.
that point. I was a much faster cyclist at that time. I was also doing a bunch of
Yeah.
ultra racing, 24-hour races, 12-hour races. So I was as fast as I've ever been. I was in peak shape
Yeah.
at that point in my life. And I thought it was attainable.
Yeah. And then obviously I have to ask you about the
Yeah,
accident, even though I don't want
nah,
to,
that's
but
okay.
that must have been almost like
It
life-changing
was.
event.
Yeah. For sure, it was. I mean, I was on 1000K. I was actually prepping for PBP. It was the year right before
Yeah.
PBP 2010, and I was on a 1000K event in preparation, both to train and also to get a better start time, a registration time. And just an hour or two into the ride, I got hit from behind by a car, didn't see it coming, didn't hear it coming, don't have any memory of the actual event. My first memory is in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. So, people that stopped that I was on the ride with afterwards said I was conscious and talking to the emergency medical people. But I don't have any memory of it, which is probably a good thing. So in terms of trauma, I think there's a bunch of trauma that's related to that, but not the kind like, that derives straight from memory. It's not like I have that memory.
And I think you broke, was it 27?
I broke 27 bones. Yeah. I could bear weight on one limb, my one arm, my clavicle and arm were broken. My two legs were broken. My hip was broken. So I was a mess.
George.
Yeah.
And it took you, like, how long did it take you to recover to actually start riding maybe, 100K or like doing any kind of distance?
I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Then I was released and came home. And then, I was able to ride a stationary bike earlier than I could ride on the road. I don't think it was until April. It was August that it happened. So April, I was able to even go on the road at all with a bike. And then it was in, the following summer, I think June or July, I did my first, no, it was actually August. It was because there were people that had ridden PBP 2011 who were on this ride, and I was riding with them. It was my first 200K. It was their sort of cool down 200K. So that was my first event after that accident. But
well, George, I'm glad you made a complete recovery. Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk about your wife, because again, my wife probably would never have allowed me to go back on a bike again. So she is a saint. Have we discussed
She is,
this already?
that is a very appropriate term to refer to her.
So how does she handle, just thinking about you there out on the road still?
I think, it's funny. It's like she doesn't want to know some of the details. It's like, she just like, I want to know where you're going, and share a map in case I need to know where to find you. So she liked to know the details, emergency contact details, but she's not interested in me texting her in the middle of a ride saying, almost done, here's a great photo of what's going on. I think she likes to sort of keep that separate. She's been very supportive and, I've made some significant changes to, the way I ride, the kinds of roads I ride on, the filter I use to decide whether something's, meets my criteria for a safe ride. So I've made I ride on much less busy roads than I used to, although, you can't protect yourself completely from horrible tragedy and incidents, but I do what I can, and she appreciates that.
Cool. So then, happier topic. So 2015, how did you kind of formulate a strategy? Well, I suppose, after you started recovering, did you in the back of your mind say, well, I'm definitely going to do PBP. I have to do this for myself, or is that something that just emerged over time?
When I was still on pain medication in the hospital, I was convinced I was going to be able to get this done in 2011. I was like, okay, that's almost a year. I could probably do that. And then it became clear that there was no way that was going to happen. But then immediately at that time, PBP 2015 was on my radar, was my mantra. Yeah. In fact, I got a vanity license plate. It occurred to me that in the state of New York, the standard license plate is 3 letters followed by 4 numbers. And I said, I could get a plate that says PBP 2015 and nobody would know. It's a vanity plate. It's sort of like my secret, Batman plate that only randonneurs can interpret. But I have that plate to this day.
Well, you had to finish it if you had that.
Exactly. Every time I looked at my car, I said, I got to get out and train. Got to make that happen.
That's great. Cool. So then what was the kind of strategy? You weren't going to do Charlie Miller. You were still you just wanted to complete it. Isn't that right?
Yeah. At that point, I was no longer as fast as, I tried to get, back into shape and did get into really pretty good shape. But that sort of speed edge that I had, I was a few years older and just never really got back to that kind of speed. So that was no longer a goal. It became finishing PBP, and finishing with enough gas in the tank that I was still conscious and aware of what was happening, and that I enjoyed it, that I really was able to fully enjoy and take in, because I knew, having done an international ride, that this was going to be a huge cultural experience as well. as a physical accomplishment. So it was really about the experience as much as it was about the accomplishment for me. And I think that's something that has sort of occurred to me as I've gotten older. You know, when I was first randonneuring, it was all about the accomplishment, even just personally, or because I wanted to share that with other people. And then when I realized other people don't really care, you know, and I'd already done a bunch of stuff, I realized, well, it's actually not about the accomplishment. It's about the experience. You know, it's about, I really want to have that experience. And that's what PBP became for me.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Brief aside, I think, was it your independent fabrication bike that got destroyed?
It was my first independent fabrication bike.
Oh,
but
I do.
I do love those bikes. Oh, it was fantastic. I got another one built up. Yeah. So interesting story. I got a, the insurance covered a new IndyFab bike, so I got another one built up. And then I realized I've got all these other bike parts that are usable, but not the frame. The frame had been destroyed. And, I had, the fitter had built up an IndyFab for me, which was slightly off, and it was his fault. Yeah. And so he sent the frame back. He didn't get the measurements quite right. And so I thought he sent the frame back to the builder, but he had just kept the frame. And so when I approached him, I said, I got all these spare parts. He said, I still have that frame. It's just the width of the seat stays was not wide enough for the fenders I wanted. So I rebuilt that first original frame up with all the spare parts, the gearing and all that stuff, the brakes from my bike that were salvageable. So now I've got two IndyFabs.
Wow, that's cool. I have a kind of a theory about independent fabrication. Like, I think that any successful bike brand has 4, 5, 6 letters. Mm-hmm. And despite having like 30 letters, I don't know how many they have, they're still successful. So they must be a really good bike.
It's a great bike.
They are beautiful, by the way.
It's a beauty.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, I love it.
That's cool. Tell me about then the logistics in getting to Paris. Obviously, you'd gone to London before, so maybe it wasn't as big a deal, or was it still challenging?
No, well, it was challenging, and I think, you know, my experience, you know, I've got 2 kids. They're grown now, but at the time I was doing all this riding, they were young teenagers, preteens, then teenagers, you know, and so getting to an event like PBP and the logistics involved with planning it, training for it, saving money for it, you know, it feels like by the time you get to the starting line and you're actually on your bike, it's like, that's the easiest part. Now all you've got to do is just ride your bike. That's easy. So there are so many logistics that you just have to, so many details. And, it could be a little daunting, and thank God there are so many people that have done it. There's a great community of people that are sharing, you know, ideas and resources. And, so it was not as big an uphill battle as it would have been if I'd never traveled internationally with a bike, but it's still, there were some challenges involved. And at that time, there was a guy named Claude who was doing he was sort of a travel agent that was sort of arranging stuff for American riders that made that a lot of that easier for people that chose that path.
Oh, that's cool. Let's describe the starting line.
Yeah.
I assume you were emotional, George. You're an emotional man.
I was pretty emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. But as you describe, it's a kind of relief because you just know now all you need to do is pedal.
Yeah.
So maybe tell me about the ride itself.
So I chose to ride in the 84-hour start, you know, when I had an option of either doing 90 hours. I knew 80 hours was out, but when I had the option to do either 90 hours or 84, I chose 84 because it had the early morning start. There were no early morning 90-hour slots. That's an evening start. Okay. And I knew that the thing that was going to be my downfall, if I had any, was going to be sleep. You know, then I was really concerned about what it was going to mean to me to start with a sleep deficit, you know, to start at night and to go through a whole night at first. So I knew that I was going to have a greater likelihood of success starting at 4 a.m. or whatever the time was, 4:35. The way I did on, you know, all the 600s I've done before. And I did, you know, that was going to work out well for me. So it was black when I started, you know, it was pitch black, and 84 hours, a smaller start than the 90 hour. There's a little less sort of carnival atmosphere. The whole 90-hour groups left already. The 80-hour groups left already. In 2011, the start was right by the velodrome, you know, in Secatan. And that was an amazing place. and a really fun place to start and finish the ride. So I think there was sort of some energy in the air around that, and it was just beautiful. I just remember starting and going off into the darkness and seeing all the red lights ahead of me and the red, the white lights behind me, and just feeling like, wow, I'm part of something really big. And, randonneuring events are not usually mass big events. If you're in an event that's got 35 people or 50 people, that can be a lot, and so the fact that you clip it in with hundreds of people is just a really different experience. And it's a really exciting one.
Yeah. And were you riding by yourself, or were you?
Yeah, I did. So that one I planned to just go by myself. I knew other people that were riding, but I didn't align my start time with other people. There were some people I knew that were sort of 15 minutes behind me, and a couple people. So I knew I would run into people in the 84-hour pack, but not that I was starting with.
Yeah. And I know I had another question. Actually, I've got lots of questions. It's an interview. So what was your plan in terms of sleep? What were you hoping to do there?
So
just ride as far as you could?
I really just wanted to ride as far as I could. I thought, if I get as far as Lodiac on the way out, that would be great, almost 300K, or I guess maybe it's a little over 300K at that point. And I thought that would be a really great, or maybe it's I forget the numbers now at this point, but it seemed like a manageable chunk. And that the volume was not going to be so great at Lodiac, which can be a bottleneck for, the sleep stop, because it's so well placed. Everybody wants to sleep there. But with the 84-hour start, and one of the great things about that band of riders is the volume, for the most part, is reduced. So some of that pinch you feel in the 90-hour isn't there. So I did, in fact, make it out to Lodiac and slept there, and that was great. I mean, I just think like sleeping in that felt like an airplane hangar, with just farting and burping people and all kinds of energy, and it was a great restful night. That a few hours that I slept there.
And what was your overall kind of energy? Was it, I'm definitely going to finish this, or was there not a feeling of dread, but you felt something could go wrong? Like what?
No, I did. I was fairly confident. I mean, I was fairly confident that I knew that I could ride the distance. I had experience riding the distance before.
Yeah.
So I wasn't so worried about, was my body going to give out? I wasn't as fast as I was when I was a bit younger. So, and that has an impact on time and thinking about, okay, well, what's time going to be like? And I was in the 84-hour start, so I'd already started with a 6-hour deficit or handicap. Yeah. And that's what ended up sort of providing a bit of stress. And I was a little surprised by that. I would get to controls, and it wasn't that they were closing, but I was like doing the math in my head, which is not really my strong suit to begin with. And then I'm sleep deprived. And then I'm trying to have to sort of subtract and figure out, well, how much time do I have left? And it started to become clear to me that I was like, my sleep bank was not so, my bank of time was not so great. And I had to get on my bike too soon and get back out there, and didn't have adequate, rest. And I was like, well, I got to just go, because, I got to be at that next control, and I've only got 3 hours to get there. So I better go, So that was the sort of thing that became a theme for me throughout that event. And I did meet up with a friend who I'd ridden with here in on the East Coast, and we'd done a bunch of rides together, and he and I teamed up and rode a big chunk of the middle section together, and that was great to have a buddy to ride with and to stop with. But yeah, we were burning candles and matches, and sort of, I'd get to a control, and I'd stop, and I'd have some food, and I'd say, well, I guess I only have about a half hour to nap, and then I got to get back on the bike. So that was not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think the 84-hour start thing fascinates me.
Yeah.
It's simple math.
I know.
If it's your first time, I would imagine, and I know many people disagree with me, but lopping off 6 hours can't seem logical.
No,
right? Okay.
It doesn't.
It doesn't seem. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So tell me, were there any dark moments at all? in your first one?
Definitely. Literally, there were dark moments, and the dark moments were in the dark. It
Okay.
wasn't, I wasn't afraid. I don't really have any feelings of fear or anything like I was having, like recurring thoughts about my accident or anything like that. But I was hallucinating a bit, and so I was like running out of steam and middle of the night, too tired on the bike. And it wasn't like I was seeing things, but what was this strange feeling of sort of not really knowing what was on the other side of the darkness. It's sort of, I had these sort of sensations that I'm like climbing a big hill and that there's this vast sort of view
Yes.
off to my left. And
Yeah.
then I realized, no, these are just cornfields and I've just been riding on a
Yeah.
flat area here. So it was like that perspective was off and
Yeah.
it was just sort of bizarre.
Yeah.
And those are some
I,
dark
I
times.
I recently did a 600K that I DNF'd,
Uh-huh.
but I remember riding at the middle of the night, and I was pretty sure that my shadow was a different entity. It wasn't, didn't belong to me, right? It was very trippy,
Yeah, it is.
even though it wasn't a full
Yeah.
hallucination, but your brain starts working in different
Yeah, it
ways. It's crazy.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoyed you had a mantra as well. I'll read it for you. Relentless forward motion,
Yeah.
right? That's what you'd say
That's
to
what I
yourself,
would
which
say.
is that's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
So then as you got closer to the end,
Mhm.
I would imagine and I'm going to read another quote from your excellent report, okay? So let me just say, in a weird way, I feel like completing PBP has actually set me free. I'm no longer that guy with a single-minded goal on the horizon. So I'm sure that was kind of in your mind as you're getting towards the end,
Yeah.
because it does feel amazing when you're almost 100% sure
Yeah.
I'm going to finish this thing. Yeah. See, so did you think you'd ever come back and do it again at that point?
I did. I don't remember feeling like, oh, I'm done with it. I've accomplished this. I've checked it off. I am released. I
Yeah.
did feel released because it had been such a single focus. So I do remember that feeling of, okay, now I can just think about some other stuff. But it wasn't that I didn't want to come back. I thought this is wonderful. I mean, so much of PBP is unique, and I love randonneuring, and it really is a very unique and amazing cultural experience. So I had a sense I wanted to come back, and in fact, I thought, well, you miss out a little bit on some of the carnival, as I mentioned, on the 84-hour start. So I knew that when I came back, I wanted to do the 90-hour start. I wanted to be
Yeah.
able to be a part of that sort of moving party, and
Completely.
so I
Completely.
knew
Yeah.
that pretty soon after I finished, I didn't tell my wife that, of course, but I did have in my
That's
mind
good.
that I would want to come back for the 90-hour start.
That's nice. So between 2015 and 2019, did you do any long rides? Were you still as
I
big into
did. Yeah.
randonneuring?
I was still very into randonneuring. I still had,
Yeah.
I was doing SR series a few times. I did in preparation for 2019, I did a 1000K. It was a similar registration,
Yeah.
situation where if you did that the year before, you got an earlier registration time. So I did a wonderful 1000K ride out in Wisconsin with a couple friends who then became a pair of riders that I planned to ride in PBP 2019 with. So that was, we formed a
Yeah.
posse that we wanted to sort of stick together. So I had a very different
That's cool.
approach to 2019.
That's great. So you decided, well, actually, you also had a hip condition. Am I
Yeah,
right in
right.
saying that? Yes.
Yeah.
So
So in the
you
middle
got
of all that, right? So,
yes. Oh boy.
when I had my, so I fractured the femoral neck, which is the part of the femur that holds the ball, connects to the femur and that little neck in there. And when I had damaged that, they repaired it right away during the accident. But the doctor said to me, he said, this could lead to a condition called necrosis. It could cause, due to a lack of blood traffic between those different parts of the femur, you might just lose the ball. Essentially, is what happens. So I said, well, how am I going to know? He said, oh yeah, you're going to know. And sure enough, I started to have hip pain over the year or two later, several years later at this point, because now it wasn't until 2018 that I had to hit my hip replacement. So it was probably like 16, 17, I started to have hip pain and then realized, well, I really got to
Yeah.
deal with this. So in 2018, November of 2018, I had a total hip replacement, foolishly thinking, oh, I could get ready for PBP in August of 2019. So I didn't really have the timing on that right. So I wasn't able to ride on my bike again until April again. So I didn't do any riding on my bike until April of 2019. And then trying to get the volume of riding in order to be ready and prepared for PBP, I just really wasn't physically conditioned well enough. And so it came out in sleep deprivation. And that's eventually what caused my DNF was just feeling like I'm not safe on a bike. I'm running out. There's no way I can, I was doing the math in my head, which was probably a mistake. I probably did the math wrong. And I suffered from what I would recommend nobody ever does, which is to make a decision about quitting a ride before you've slept.
Yeah.
I made a decision and I said, no, I'm going to sleep now and I'm not going to start when I get up in the morning. And that was a mistake.
Yeah.
I think if I had waited until the morning, I would have had a different perspective on it. But
so this one, 2019, you decided to do the full 90 hours. You wanted the whole bulge experience.
I did,
think you mentioned.
The whole enchilada.
Everything was going well, but obviously, as you just said, you probably didn't have enough training in your legs.
Yeah.
Sleep depth.
Yeah.
So how long did it take before it became onerous and then you decided to DNF?
So it was, and I wasn't in bad physical shape. I mean, my experience of it was not that I was in pain or I was suffering or like I can't make that next hill. It was just literally like, I just really didn't feel like I had enough time to do it. In fact, the first time I got to Lodiac, I ran into somebody I knew. They're like, man, you look fresh. Oh my God, everything going okay? Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So, it was on the way back. It was on a night section, coming into Lodiac, before Lodiac. And the big difference with this was we rode with a support vehicle. So the three of us together had an RV, driven by the brother of one of the riders, who was going to, meet us in each way. We thought this was going to be the way that we sort of beat the the bad parts of the bulge issue. Having a comfortable place to sleep is sometimes a double-edged sword, right? Because then you say, well, I do have a way back, and so,
yes.
So it was coming into Lodiac that I realized. So it was really, it was 750 miles or something by time, or 750K or what? Again, my math is bad. Yeah. It was Lodiac on the way back, 2/3 of the way. It was 2/3 of the way.
Yes. And before I ask you about the cultural event that is PBP, the people by the road, etc., how did you feel and how did you deal with that DNF? Was it an issue for you at all?
It's funny. I had been riding for 12 years at that point. I had never DNF'd a ride in my entire life. That was the very first DNF I ever had. I would sooner DNS a ride than DNF a ride. I thought, if I've started something, by God, I'm going to finish that thing. And so there were times where I'd say, you know what, I'm not feeling it. Maybe I won't start this one. That would have been the way I approached it. But if I started, by God, I was going to finish. And so it was the very first time I ever did it. And you know what? The world didn't end. The world didn't end.
Yeah, it's funny. As you get older, you start realizing that, isn't that right?
It's just a bike ride.
It is. Yes. So, George, it sounds like you are really into the cultural aspects of PBP. Maybe tell me a little bit more about that, the support, etc.
I think anybody that's spent a lot of time riding in the U.S., in any part of the U.S., some regions are sort of more prone to this than others. You feel like an enemy in your own land. You feel like you're being treated with great hostility, or at best maybe ambivalence. But you don't feel like you're surrounded usually by a lot of kindness. And what was just an overwhelming experience from the very beginning of PBP was how important this ride is to the people of Brittany. This is important to them. Being a part of this as a spectator is important to them. That they want to be there on the side of the road, handing things out to you. You and they are a part of a sort of symbiotic cultural experience. And the way we were treated by the drivers, by of course the staff and the volunteers were great. They're always great in an event, but it was like the pedestrians, so culturally it became clear to me that this event, which goes all the way back to the dawn of cycling, it was a race back at predates the Tour de France. I mean, it was like, this was one of the earliest bicycle races in the world. And the people of Brittany really care about cycling, and so it felt like really being a celebrity. In fact, on that point, one of the ways I really saw that in action was, I felt that very much when I was doing it the first time and then the second time. But when I took my kit off, because I was still traveling with my friend's brother in the RV and still providing support now to my two friends who were riding, and I'd go to the controls, but I was wearing my civilian clothes. It was like, people just look through you. They don't, if you show up at a control and you're just wearing normal clothes, people are like, yeah, get out of my way. Where are the riders? When you come in wearing a cycling kit, it's like, people are like, what do you need? Can I take you bottles? It's like you're a celebrity. And I think it's one of the few places that an amateur cyclist can feel that kind of enthusiasm.
Yeah, I think a lot about it because we're all human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Same operating system.
Yeah.
On that 600K I DNF'd, we're climbing up this trail, 3 a.m. And next thing out of nowhere, some pickup truck, we hadn't seen a car in hours, comes flying by and does kind of a coal roll, that kind of thing.
My God.
And you're thinking, that is so weird.
Yes,
isn't it?
so
It's weird. Like, even the energy required for that person, it's pitch black. I didn't know what he looked like. And versus that experience at PBP. Same humans. It's just different culture.
It's the polar opposite. Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Cool. So my next question, George, are you going to do it again?
Is my wife listening?
No.
Or share the link.
No.
Yeah. I would very much like to do it again. I would very much like to do it again. Absolutely.
Yes.
I feel like I've got a little unfinished business, and I would love to go back. And also just to have that experience. I mean, it is really unique. I mean, there's nowhere else to find that. The people.
I get you.
And so I'll go back.
Would you do anything different this time? Because you've done it in two different ways, or you've approached it in two different ways already. Yeah,
for sure. I would. And I also DNF'd. So I've had two DNFs. The second DNF was the second LEL attempt. So I only DNF really big events that cost thousands of dollars to get to.
Nice.
And again, it was sort of running out of time. And our approach on that one was to book places, hotels and what. I was sort of coming out of COVID and not wanting to be in a room with potentially sick people and whatnot and all that. And so that was part of it. And so I think what I determined then at that point was, I really think the best way to approach these rides is just to be in the controls, is just to sleep in the controls. Sleep when you need to sleep, ride when you need to ride, having a predetermined plan. If that falls out of sync with what your body needs, then you're sleeping at a time your body doesn't need to, and it becomes a way to slow you down. And other people do it. But for me, as I think about my next PBP, it's going to be, I think, doing it in the 90-hour start and just sleeping where I can sleep. And if that means a formal bed and a control, if it means an ATM, phone booth, ditch nap, whatever it might mean, I'll be ready for it.
It's like you described, trying to do the math while you're riding doesn't work.
Not my strength.
It's also like trying to have the perfect experience. There is no perfect experience, isn't that right?
I know.
Because I did the hotel thing once. We slept for 2 hours and I just couldn't sleep, kept going, right?
Yeah.
So there's just no perfect approach.
No.
That's why it's so wonderful each time.
Exactly.
Cool, George. I'm going to ask you then your 3 unique tips for someone who hopes to finish PBP, okay?
I would say tip number 1 would be to bring a spare tire.
Okay.
I did that. I had a flat, the very last section from Drew to the finish. I was absolutely riding a high. The rain had stopped. I was 30 miles from the finish. I knew this was just going to be, it was attainable. And the energy, the enthusiasm was just palpable. And I left the control with good fueling and a group of a dozen or so people. And we're crossing this field and I hear this sound, poof, and I was like, oh, that poor sucker. And I realized that poor sucker was me. And so I had to change a tire at that point. I changed a tube at that point, and my hands weren't working. I could barely remember how to change a flat. And the fact that I had brought a spare tire meant that I could just take that old one off. I didn't need to look for things. I could just put that in my bag, put the brand new fresh tire on. So I will always bring a fresh tire on a 1200K. So that would be one piece of advice. I think the other thing I would say would be to really understand that PBP is not just a long ride. It's not just another 1200K. Some people ride it to see how fast they can do it. Some people ride it. There are all kinds of reasons why people ride it, but I would suggest really that people lean into the culture and the history and the really unique things that make PBP what it is. You hear people talk about, being a full value rider, the people that take the full amount of time rather than trying to take the least amount of time. This is the kind of ride I think you should really take the full amount of time. Every minute you're doing that, if you're not suffering, you're really experiencing something unique. So I think that would be another piece of advice. And then the third thing is something I mentioned before, which is never quit. Never make a decision about quitting before you've had a good night's sleep or even a bad night's sleep.
Okay, that's cool. Well, George, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Had quite a journey, and I will see you in 2027.
Oh, I look forward
Hopefully
to
I'll
it.
meet your wife as well.
Oh, yeah.
She fascinates me.
Oh, you'd love my wife. I look forward to it. Peter, it's been an honor talking with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay.
George.